Hey, this is Sleeper. Welcome back to my channel. We are finishing up the learning process module from Hack the Box Academy. This is the last part. I didn't realize how long this particular section was last time, but we will finish it up right now. A good example is that if an answer to a task is already known, the task is no longer necessarily difficult to solve. Many people believe that searching for an answer is one of the most difficult activities that accompany them throughout their lives. However, finding the answer becomes the opposite when the question is asked correctly. It is much more challenging to ask the right questions when we do not know the concepts or do not have any knowledge of a particular area in the first place. We have all been in a situation where we suddenly did not know what to do and could not even understand what to start with to figure out the situation. At this point, we should choose 3 to 5 such situations from our lives and write down one question for each of them. These can be any situation. We can take difficult and obscure situations and then write down a question for them. Throughout this section, we will learn a model that will help us see the difference between the quality of the questions we were asking and the questions we needed to ask. In doing so, we will also quickly become aware of the model's effectiveness and how much it would have helped us at the time. This is the best way to judge the effectiveness based on our personal life experiences. Therefore, we should not skip this step and write down 3 to 5 situations from our lives now. Question states: first of all, we need to solve a certain myth around questions before we can continue at this point. We need to be clear about the following. There are no good or bad questions. End of story. Let us examine the following question and clear up this myth once and for all. What are good questions? Let us assume that the answer is X, Y, and Z. Is this question good or bad? It does not matter and is irrelevant. Good or bad is a state we attribute to the question. What influence does this condition have on the answer? None. The answer remains X, Y, Z. If we do something that does not affect the result, it does not matter and is therefore completely irrelevant. This is the same as asking ourselves, what happens if I jump into the water? To this question, we then add the following factors. The water is cold, hot, dark, or transparent. How does the water's condition affect the result when we jump into the water? It does not. Apart from all the other consequences, we get wet either way. The interesting thing is that with the condition, we have even come closer to the actual situation. Because we used it to describe the state of the water, this is much closer connected to the state than the state of the question. How would we influence the result if we set the state of the question and say that it is a good question? We would not. People use the states good and bad to describe the profit or loss they expect from the question. If people get an answer that benefits them, they classify the question as a good one. However, what if the question leads to a loss, or let us even say does not help the person? Is the question bad? Actually not. The state we give to the question does not affect the answers. The state attributed to the question belongs to the answer or the result. The answer can be to some extent good or bad, but not necessarily, depending on our goal and whether we are getting closer to it. If we come closer to the answer or result, moving away from the less ideal goal is good. We can assign 2 states to the question. Thus, we would describe it as a rough question or a precise question. A rough question would be, for example, How can I hack X? A precise question would be, how can I use the server's SMB service to identify its existing user accounts? As we can see from these two examples, this state of precision can greatly affect the result and the answer. Nevertheless, a precise question is still not good. Because good or bad are irrelevant states, we know that they do not influence the result or the answer. Questions in general. We use questions in everyday life more often than we realize at first glance. On average, we ask between 3 to 5 questions per minute. Of course, this depends on the situation. We can experiment and set a timer for 1 minute and observe our thoughts during this period. Every time we notice that we ask ourselves something or something is unclear to us, we make a mark on a piece of paper until the timer runs out. To do this experiment, we need to take a pen and a piece of paper and set the timer. From now on, the timer should run. Questions can be asked in many different ways, because all questions are adapted to the circumstances, situations, and the desired goal. Questions are an essential part of the thinking process in which links are created between information nodes in our brain. Thus, it is also a fixed and unavoidable part of the learning process. Removing questions, therefore, also reduces the learning process enormously. If we do not question anything when we read content, it is like a cooking recipe without any information about how to prepare it, because a recipe contains a big question from the ground up. How do I cook the dish? 2 main points are worked through for each recipe: ingredients and the method of preparation. Learning material content can be equated with the ingredients. The preparation method can therefore be correlated with our questions, because the questions determine which step we will take next and define our approach. Finally, how the cook describes the preparation method describes when, how, and what needs to be added and processed to get closer to the finished dish. The cook or the author's approach may have worked 100%, but anyone who has ever cooked from a recipe knows that a written down recipe alone will not make the dish tasty. We must prepare and practice it, using the means at our disposal. A professional cook typically has considerable experience and often uses special ingredients that can be very expensive, and we do not know any other use for them. Therefore, this is an essential example that copying and imitating what has been shown and explained will not always produce the desired result. By now, the timer should have run out, and now we should add up the number of questions that came to mind while reading during this period. That would be tough, reading this and trying to count your thoughts. But anyways, for comparison, at least 10 questions could have been asked. If more than 10 questions came up for us, all the better. The more questions we ask, the better understanding we develop of the whole picture. To do this, let us briefly imagine the situation where we need to open a lock and follow a methodology that most people use today. The question that can be concluded from this situation is, how do we open the lock? The question is unnecessary if it is a standard door lock, because we have enough experience and knowledge to open the door with the appropriate key. In this case, the key is the known tool that we use to unlock or lock the door. The situation is different if we have a vault in front of us that requires a combination of numbers. What questions do we need to ask to get the answers that will allow us to find the right tools or methods and use them accordingly? We know the goal to which we are attracted. Once we know the goal to which we are attracted, we can use various principles such as the Pareto principle or Occam's razor to develop our talents and skills, and make our decisions to pass the obstacles that fall across our path by asking the right questions. We can all ask questions. However, not many know how to ask the right questions, because some significant differences and influences can greatly affect the answers we want to receive. The goal of the question is one of the most important aspects that determine our approach and the question we ask. Let us look at a few things that we currently use in our everyday lives. Such goals that we have just talked about can be, for example, to understand the reason for an event, to experience something completely new and to understand the way something works, and to predict the effect of an event. Every question is based on 3 aspects with which we build our questions every day: origin, process, and result or goal. These questions can be of any kind and can relate to duration, reason, action-reaction, location, specification, and many others. They can be as varied as our imagination. Almost every question is based on our needs, time, type, and place. So far, everything seems to be accurate and logical. However, it is not. At this point, a few questions arise that we need to clarify. What is a question? Regardless of the form, what purpose does a question serve? Pardon me. The official definition of a question is as follows. A question is a sentence worded or expressed to elicit information. This definition has 2 core elements: sentence and information. So what is a sentence? The definition of a sentence is as follows. A sentence is a set of words that is complete in itself, typically containing a subject and predicate, conveying a statement, question, exclamation, or command, and consisting of a main clause and sometimes one or more subordinate clauses. Moreover, here comes the exciting part, a collision that will change many things for us. How many words must be used to ask the shortest question? The answer to that is a single word. Here are a few examples. Why, how, and where. Is it an actual question? Yes. Is it the shortest question or one of the most straightforward questions? Yes. Of course, these questions need context, like any other question, but this does not exclude the fact that these questions in this form with a single word represent a real question. Thus, the official definition of a question does not fit anymore. Next, the definition of a question explains its purpose. Therefore, according to the definition, the purpose is to obtain or acquire information. Let us therefore create a situation with a question to test this statement. Let us assume we see a host A and host B. To do this, we can ask the following question, which we will also ask during our penetration tests. How is host A connected to host B? Our goal was to obtain or acquire information with the help of the question posed. Did we obtain or acquire any information from this question? No. Regardless of the form of the questions asked, strictly speaking, the official definition of the question also missed the point. This is an example of how we can question certain things. As we see, the effect and the surprise can make one wonder. After all, we have just discovered that the official definition does not apply to a question. Of course, A deep discussion can be started about the question's meaning, purpose, and how it should be asked. But furthermore, here's where the question arises. How should we then define a question if the official definition does not apply? Here we see the global scale when the goal has been set incorrectly. What goal could we set for ourselves if the previous goal, to obtain information, can be constantly missed? Relationship-oriented questioning model. To do this, we must consider what our questions have in common. All our questions have a commonality, the relationship between the individual components, period. So let us take a quick look at a model we have developed, which we call the relationship-oriented questioning model, and see how it looks and works. This model represents 5 components: your position, the object, known, unknown, and other positions. So your position describes the position we are in and our view. The object is the core element of the question. The main component of our sentence takes the meaning out of the question. Known is the information known to us. Unknown is the information not known to us. And other positions describe the position of other persons. We need these components to be able to ask any question correctly. To do this, we ask any question we are interested in and break it down using the ROQ model. Certain aspects must be considered with this model, as with all others. 1. We need to find out the core element of the question and insert it as the object. And 2. We must have at least 2 components defined in the model. More than 2 components are optional. The good thing is we always already have one component, our position in the question. So even for questions that do not directly concern us or about situations we are not involved in, we still have a position and view on the object. So let us take an example using the following question. What are all the methods available to remotely access Windows operating systems? Once we have asked our question, we can break it down into its constituent parts in the ROQ model. So the same information as before. Question part, the object is Windows, known and unknown methods. Based on the parts assigned to the components, we now have to define in which relationship they act among each other. In the graphic, we see solid and dashed lines. So solid line is connection. How is X connected to Y? And dashed line, affection. How does Y influence the state of component X? Connecting the components. With this, we can go through the individual relationships and establish them between the individual components. It is recommended to always start with the object, which in this case is the Windows operating system. First, we need to establish and understand our position on the object. What is the purpose for us to use Windows? Mainly, we use the operating system to use its functions to solve our tasks. We describe this as operating on. How does Windows influence our state and our position? Windows is the most used operating system in the world and has the most compatibility and many user-friendly functions. Therefore, we can also summarize this and call it provides functionality. Now we can connect the relationships between Windows and the methods we know. What must Windows do or offer to be managed by remote access methods? A service must allow remote access over the internet or network. We know for sure WinRM, remote desktop, and a few more. If not, it doesn't matter. We will learn these in other modules. Otherwise, we would not be able to access it remotely. We call this connection listening service. Next, the following question comes up. How do the remote access methods affect Windows and thus change the state of Windows? What do these methods provide us with? Here, the answer and the purpose are already in the description. These allow remote access. Now let us look at what we know about the known remote access methods. What is the purpose of remote access methods? The purpose is to be able to manage Windows in different ways remotely. So all we do with it is to use it. So therefore we call this connection using. How do the different remote access methods that we know affect us? Apart from the different services these methods are designed for, they all have one thing in common. They allow us to interact with Windows. Therefore, we can call this connection allow to interact with. Since we already know some remote access methods, we know how they are connected to Windows. Before Windows can be accessed remotely, the corresponding service must be running. Which services must Windows have running to use methods unknown to us? We can not know this because the methods are unknown to us. Therefore, we name it like this, question mark, question mark, question mark. Now the same question arises again. How do the remote access methods affect Windows and thus change the state of Windows? What do these methods offer us? The different methods offer different ways to access Windows because the purpose of the methods in this case has not changed. Therefore, we call it again remote access. Now that we know and understand the relationships between all the individual components, we know exactly what information we are missing and what we should focus on. In this case, we can use Windows services to find the unknown remote access methods. Therefore, if we look closely at all possible services that allow remote access, we can probably even find our own ways to use the service for remote access. The special thing about this model is that it is stackable. For example, if we have identified such Windows services and found unknown methods, the field unknown becomes known and would look like this. Practice. The model may be unusual at first, and from experience, I can say that many people have difficulties in the beginning to apply this model. You'll be using this model subconsciously after practicing 5 to 10 times. You'll not have to think about it much, and you will see the difference in a very short time when you have practiced this model. In fact, with these few practice sessions, you will internalize this model so much that you will even begin to use it automatically during conversations. This is the recipe that I have given to you, and now you must learn to prepare the dish for yourself. Now take the 3 to 5 questions from the situations we had to write down at the beginning of this section and apply this model. You'll be amazed at the conclusions you will come to. However, this model has one special feature. If applying this model to your question is unsuccessful, you'll have to rephrase it and make it more precise. Because this feature of the ROQ model will not allow us to ask questions to which there is no clear answer. Now let us settle one last question. So, what is the right question? A right question is a precise question that allows us to establish the relationships between the components, to understand them, and to take us one step further to the required answer. Handling frustration. Frustration is an emotional reaction to an event, situation, or condition that occurs in the form of disappointment or powerlessness. Most often, such a feeling occurs in varying intensity, depending on expectations or desires. There are two different types of frustration. One is caused by external influences, such as negative opinions of superiors, and the other is caused by inner frustration, caused by conscious or somewhat subconscious thought processes. Most people are not aware that feelings reflect subconscious thoughts and thought processes. That is why we can understand quite well how we think from our feelings. Often it helps to listen to our thoughts from a third-person perspective or imagine that our best friend expresses these thoughts. With that, we gain some distance from the feeling of being affected by it, which makes it easier to construct an objective opinion and judgment about it. Everyone has an individual frustration tolerance, which is why people with a low frustration tolerance tend to give up or break off quickly when unexpected resistance arises, or the expected success does not occur within a specific time. The result of this behavior is an increased tendency to stress and avoidance and partly aggressive forms of reaction. The frustration tolerance can be trained and developed very well. There have certainly been situations where we may have experienced a friend in a stressful situation who remained impressively calm. For this situation, the frustration tolerance was very pronounced. Many factors can speak for this, but the fact remains that the situation seemed to be much more stressful for us than our acquaintance let it affect him. In order to express frustration tolerance in this way, it is crucial to know where it comes from. Let us take a look at the following diagram. Since we are dealing with frustration here, we can see that from the diagram, in this case, we lack some resources that frustrate us. In information security and pen testing, these kinds of resources will often be information that we have to work with. Perhaps we have already read it several times that enumeration is key. If not, it is not bad. We will fall over it. Since we are dealing with the offensive aspects of information security, it is essential that we can get the information by ourselves. This is a skill that must be continuously trained. We will have to deal with different services, sources, and technologies to find out how to get the information we need. The feeling of frustration with a lack of resources depends on our skill. If we do not have the necessary skills, we will feel anxiety, which brings us back to the topic of comfort and comfort zone. We should also understand the connections between the individual topics better to get back to the frustration tolerance level. To express our frustration tolerance adequately, we need to consciously, but in a controlled way, place ourselves in situations where a particular frustration can be assumed. It is important to note that this must be done in a controlled and conscious way. It must therefore be our conscious decision to deal with the upcoming situation. To make it a little clearer, pay attention to our feelings for the following example. Imagine that you have to catch a train. To catch it in time, we are forced to run about 2 miles quickly. We take all excuses and changes out of the situation for this example, think outside the box, and determine that you have no other choice in this example. We will be sweaty. Maybe we will even get a bit dirty and out of breath. And maybe we will even miss our train because it came too early for once. Furthermore, now let us change the situation a bit and imagine that you consciously decide to leave the house too late and run fast to catch the train. Even if we do not catch that train, our frustration level will be much lower than in the first example. We will no longer pay attention to the external factors we blame for not getting the train, but we will find ourselves analyzing our reactions. Do not forget that this feeling of frustration is temporary. This means that when we feel frustrated, it will pass. Most people get scared and panicky at such feeling, which leads to the fact that such people sometimes even act aggressively. They are not aware that this is a temporary feeling. Therefore, we do not need to be afraid to venture into such situations. Frustration passes. The experience we have gained through it remains. Instead, over time, we will become calmer in reacting and dealing with such stressful situations, which in turn will strengthen our self-confidence. We can control our inner frustration. The frustration of the external factors, however, can hardly be controlled. Learning progress. An important aspect to be considered in the learning process is progress. In order to see our progress, two specific states are compared, including a specific time window between the learning process. In other words, we compare our knowledge from the past with the present and try to keep track of the progress to give ourselves the confirmation that we have achieved something new. When the point comes where we cannot give ourselves the confirmation, we look for it from others. However, no one else will be able to give us confirmation without taking the path together with us. To make it clear, let us return to the example of the mountains. Now let us suppose that you have gone down the mountain and have a very long and arduous way behind you. You have already passed a few stops and towns, and now after a couple weeks, you meet another person whom you ask if you have already performed well. This person will never be able to tell us if our performance was good or bad without having walked the path together with us. Metaphorically speaking, even if this person has already gone the same way, all the factors cannot have been the same, such as rain, thunderstorms, heat, wind, etc. People who have been on the road for years will know how exhausting it can be and what hurdles they have to overcome. We only gain height by going uphill. Going uphill is always exhausting, and we may slip and slide a little bit down again. What is essential here is to keep moving constantly. How fast we want to reach a defined height depends entirely on our ambition. Whether we only take a step a day or 10 steps a day only plays a role in the duration. The difference here is easy to see. If you stop on the mountain and do not climb any further up, you will stay at the same spot. Look at the following mathematical example to see the difference in numbers. 1 to the 365th and 1.01 to the 365th to the power of. Here we can already see the enormous difference, how much it takes, even if we only increase our performance 1% per day. If we want to record our progress and write it down to look back and see how far we've already gone, you can create two lists. List number 1, on the first list, you write down the current date and everything you know about your desired topic with all your skills with an estimated scale of 1 to 10. Try to make it as detailed as possible. The more detailed it is, the clearer the difference will be for you to see later. As soon as you think this list is ready, put it down or save it in a way that you will have access to it even after 1 year. List number 2. The second list is written continuously. This means that as soon as you have familiarized yourself with the topic, you have learned something new for yourself. You'll add it to the list. Try to learn every day, even if it only takes 10 minutes. If you want to do it more scientifically, to get even better results, document the calendar weeks. We will be amazed to see the progress we've made during this time. Above all, it will become evident to us why no one else but ourselves can tell if we have made good progress. And we've got a question here. To get back the cubes from this module, answer the following question. What is the difference between the two numbers of the learning progress mentioned above? So the two numbers, is it this? The actual difference? 36.7? Alright, so it's saying if we make no progress, we're the same. But if we try to improve 1% better every day in a year, we'll be 36.7% better at that particular skill. Alright, so that finishes up our learning process module from Hack the Box Academy. Once again, my name is Sleeper, and that's a wrap. Until next time.